first episode of the show. I'm so excited that you're here. I want to kick off this first episode of the show by setting a strong foundation in defining what creativity is, because I think this is going to serve as a reference point for when we start to dive deeper into other adjacent topics. And I also want to set the record straight. I want to say this for once and for all. We all have the potential to be creative. We just have to make the choice. Stick around and you'll see what I mean. Let's start with a general definition. If you look up the word creativity in the dictionary, you'll likely find one of these definitions: the ability to create, the quality of being creative, or the ability to produce original ideas. These are not bad definitions per se, but they only paint a limited picture of what creativity is. A more nuanced definition is one that I like to refer to by Dr. Eric Meisel, an American psychotherapist, teacher, coach, and author. He actually starts further back and explains that before somebody can create something, they have to choose to matter. What this means is that somebody who chooses to create realizes that what they have to share is innately valuable. They understand that putting this out into the world can have a positive impact, whether that's big or small. And because they really value these things, they're likely to engage in activities that allow them to express that. When I first heard this, I thought that was really interesting, very philosophical, but also very practical. And I had never seen anything like it before associated with creativity. So I definitely encourage you to sit with that and see what comes up for you, because I think that's really profound. Now, when we think about someone's creations, we are usually looking at the result of that person deciding to matter. And again, they understand that what they created is valuable and it's worth putting out into the world. He then goes on to describe creativity as a 4-step process. And the 4 steps are relationship with ourselves, daydreaming, connecting ideas, and producing a final product. I like to think of this 4-step process as twofold, actually. So the first part is having a relationship with yourself and spending time thinking your thoughts or daydreaming. And the second part, which is all about connecting ideas and producing something with those ideas. So I think just by thinking about this process, the step-by-step process, we can see that creativity doesn't just happen. There's a lot of things that add to us being able to create something. I also think that it's funny because in Western and capitalistic cultures, we are really focused on that last part of the process, which is to create, to produce. And this is something that I have so much to say, but I'll save it for a different episode. I digress. A different perspective that you can add to this comprehensive look into creativity is to think about artistic creativity versus problem-solving creativity. Artistic creativity is about expressing emotions, ideas, and experiences in a unique and often aesthetic way. So this tends to be much more open-ended, subjective, explorative. It's usually expressed through art, music, books, performance, cooking, gardening, knitting. You get the idea. Problem-solving creativity, on the other hand, it's about finding innovative solutions to challenges or issues. So this kind of creativity tends to be much more structured, goal-oriented, and can be measured by the effectiveness of the solution. For example, this can take the form of a new product, a new marketing strategy, a business idea, or a workaround to a technical issue. Both types of creativity are actually very valuable, and often they can intersect with each other. For example, when creating a website, you are using these two types of creativity: problem solving creativity to come up with the goal for your website, and artistic creativity to come up with the visual elements of the website, like colors and imagery. Each type of creativity serves a unique purpose, has its own process and goals, and it's measured differently. And so, as you can see, you once you understand this distinction between the two types of creativity, you can start to get a better feel for where and when you want to use your creativity. I feel like we need to take a shot every time I use the C word. So now let's talk about 3 myths of creativity. Myth number one: creativity is only for artists. I think we all have heard this one thrown around. Most people who aren't into creative pursuits will often stereotype creativity with artists. This couldn't be further from the truth. As we know, creativity can be used by anybody, but it's commonly stereotyped with artists. And I think it makes sense. I think people usually think about visual art as the most obvious expression of creativity. But as I explained earlier, creativity can be used in a multitude of ways and can be exercised by anybody if they want to. One of the things that I've noticed in my journey has been that a lot of people assume that I'm an artist and that I'm a designer and a creative person in general because I do these things. But the truth is that I started doing all the creative stuff before I even went to school for it or became a professional. Creativity is actually one of my special interests. And because of that, I research it. I like to learn about it. I like to read about it. And I engage with it pretty often. So much so that it looks like it's an innate ability, but it's taken a lot of work and a lot of time and effort to know everything that I know about creativity. So much so that I created this show to be able to talk about this topic. Myth number two: you're either born creative or you're not. Again, I've seen this one in the workplace a lot where people tend to stay comfortable and think of themselves a certain way or only explore certain things that they're comfortable with. And if they already put it in their minds that they're not creative, they don't think that they can do anything creative. And so they're going to leave it up to the other people that are. And I think it's really fascinating because that's literally the perfect example of how people's limited view and understanding of what they're capable of doing is going to hold them back. And often they won't engage in things that could probably be very fulfilling and enjoyable because they tell themselves, I'm not creative. I wasn't more creative. I should have already been doing this thing if I was going to do it. But it's never too late to start because, as I have been alluding to, creativity is an inclination and not an innate ability. It's something that you have to practice and get better at as you do it. Myth number three: creativity is a solitary pursuit. I think that a lot of people think that their best work is going to happen when they're completely left alone and they have a whole weekend to work on their project and no one talks to them and they're just in their cave. I think there's some truth to that, but it's not the entire truth. The reality is that some of the best work is going to happen in groups, in a team, in collaborations. You might go and work on your piece by yourself, but then you still have to bring it back and share with the group. And I find this to be true at work, for example. As a designer, I might go and think about ideas and come up with concepts, but ultimately the project is not going to be complete until people see it and I get feedback and I'm able to iterate from there. And when I do work for myself, like just a personal project or whatever, I love to get feedback or guidance from people who I trust because that helps me to gain perspective and tweak my project in a way that can make it better. For me, this has looked like sharing my work on Instagram. I actually stopped a year ago, but before that, I was always posting my work. And I found it really helpful to get feedback from people just to see what people reacted to. A caveat: I know that people's reactions and likes and views aren't always exactly correlated to what you create, but you can get an idea of what's interesting to people, right? And I think that all of us have to engage in that kind of a process where we share with others so that we can gain perspective and make our work better. And I think we do have to be careful where we get our feedback from, who we trust with guidance, but ultimately that's only going to make us better. We are now getting to the end of this episode. So I do want to recap what we talked about today. We touched on the basic definition of creativity. Then we talked about a more nuanced definition where I explained that creativity is choosing to matter and how creativity is broken down into 4 steps. Then we talked about artistic versus problem solving creativity. And finally, we talked about 3 common myths around creativity. Again, for anybody that missed it, everyone has potential to be creative if they choose to. Creativity is a dynamic process and a skill that you have to actively practice and engage in. If you're ready to unlock your creative potential or need help getting clear on your creative goals, I would love for us to connect. Schedule your free discovery session today, and you can find the link in the show's description to take the first step towards a more fulfilling creative life. Thanks for tuning in. And if you're listening to the podcast, please leave a review, and I will see you next week. Stay creative.